We've seen governments helping people all the time, but seeing people financially helping their country is a rare sight to see. Although it's uncommon today, there have been a few incidents in the past, but it wouldn't have been in your wildest imaginations that a country like America would need such help from its citizens, not for a small investment, but to survive as a nation. Why was the US so desperate for aid? What was happening at the time, and who were these helpers? Let's explore the 2 times private citizens bailed out the US. The first protagonist is quite well known. Some call him the man who owned America. It's said that he, with a single word or a stroke of pen, could save a company or bankrupt it. This is what J.P. Morgan was capable of. John Pierpont Morgan was born into a privileged family with his father, Junius Spencer Morgan, being a wealthy banker. He gave John the best education money could buy, but John spent most of his childhood as a sick boy with severe coughing and even scarlet fever, missing out on the luxury of playing with other kids. Instead, he was often found studying and reading financial statements. By 1857, John had studied in Boston, Switzerland, and Germany and was now 19 years old, ready to enter the workforce. Thanks to his father, John landed a job at Wall Street, but his passion for risk-taking endeavors took him elsewhere. Later, John showed a keen interest and saw the potential of the highly competitive railroad industry. He decided to purchase small railroad companies by buying massive shares and merging them. By the 1880s, John had crushed the competition and established himself as the power player in America's railroad industry. But a crisis was about to begin. In 1893, the United States faced a depression, the likes of which it had never seen before. After years of continued growth, the economic bubble burst and threw the economy into chaos. Stocks tanked, losing half their value. Thousands of businesses closed, hundreds of banks went bankrupt, and unemployment rates soared throughout the country. Amidst this, foreign investors pulled out their investments, directly hitting the US gold reserves and tanking the value of the American dollar. This created a domino effect and caused more investors to pull out. Seeing all this, John knew drastic measures were needed, so he met President Cleveland. John schemed to set up a private syndicate of the country's most prominent bankers and foreign investors to shore up America's gold reserves. The plan went into action. John's syndicate offered to buy $65 million worth of 30-year-old bonds using 3.5 million ounces of gold. And thanks to an old Civil War statute, the president could agree then and there, and so he did. John's swift actions immediately brought stability to the shaken financial market and restored faith in the economy. It's fair to say that John single-handedly saved the economy from total collapse. But this wasn't the only time John helped to stabilize the economy during a crisis. In 1907, the country again went into a deepening financial crisis, which led several banks to the brink of bankruptcy, while hordes of people lined up to withdraw their money from their bank accounts. Once again, John was called to help the government. His strategy was again to spend money where it was needed most. He gathered multiple leading financiers and leaders of the country's biggest banks and trusts to decide the effective course of action. John proposed to invest in their smaller competitors. He believed that while some banks' bankruptcy was inevitable, others could still be saved. So he and his associates deposited large sums of money in many banks to help them pay their depositors and avoid declaring bankruptcy. The US Treasury also contributed $25 million. John's ultimate plan worked. Lots of capital was injected into the economy, restoring the public confidence in America's banking system and preventing another economic disaster, all thanks to John's wheelings and dealings. He not only bailed out the US Treasury twice, but also spurred the creation of the US Federal Reserve, established in 1913. But the savior of America was nearing his farewell. John was suffering from numerous nervous breakdowns, and the public was now negatively portraying John as a powerful businessman overshadowing the government. The financier breathed his last in March 1913 while he was on a vacation in Rome. This second individual we're talking about is a forgotten hero, Robert Morris, the superintendent of finance during the American Revolution. Robert belonged to a wealthy family, and just like his father, he had made a name for himself by becoming a partner in a company that sent ships worldwide to seek out trading partners. During these ventures, Robert was able to create successful and beneficial relationships that would serve him well during the American Revolution. According to his biographer, Robert was a down-to-earth man. He seemed to have that sort of gregarious common touch. He could easily engage in conversations with the common people and fellow merchants. In a short time, Robert became the wealthiest man in the colonies. Robert was involved in the colonial resistance early on when British authorities tried to create badly needed revenue to pay off the debts of the 7-Year War. He led a rowdy street protest against the Stamp Act and played a key role in organizing the Non-Importation Agreement in 1769, which ended Philadelphia's slave trade. Soon, Robert began to purchase gunpowder and weapons to arm the Pennsylvania militia. Later on, with his wealth and connections, Robert was elected to the Pennsylvania Assembly. During the initial years of the Revolution, Robert served on congressional committees overseeing foreign affairs and the Continental Navy. He supplied the Continental Army with food, water, weapons, clothes, and other necessities. After resigning from Congress in 1778, Robert's full dedication was to find suppliers to help the colonies and their army through his contacts. By 1781, the country was broke, the army unpaid, and the worst of all, the states still ignored congressional requests and even George Washington's plea for funds to supply the Continental Army. Since there were laws that prevented forceful contributions, the country was on the brink of financial collapse. The Congress turned to Robert, asking him to serve as the first superintendent of finance to stabilize the economy and fund the war. He immediately threw himself into his new post and became one of the most powerful figures in the government. He slashed government spending and stopped paying the army, stating feeding them was enough at the time, with plans to pay them after the war. He secured massive loans from the French, and he paid the rest of the deficit by his own pocket. Not only this, he founded the First National Bank of America to lend money to the government. Since all states had their own currencies, Morris issued a common currency. Morris notes, backed by his personal fortune. But this was a temporary solution, and Robert embarked on his most ambitious endeavor: to find a permanent revenue source for the government. He proposed a new national tariff on imports, which failed because it required unanimous approval from all 13 states. With no stable revenue, French loans drying up, and the army getting restless, Robert resigned the following year and returned to Pennsylvania to focus on business. But soon after, he signed the Constitution and was offered the role of First Secretary of the Treasury. He declined it and recommended Alexander Hamilton, whose policies mirrored Robert's earlier attempted reforms. After the war, Robert had poured most of his wealth into land, but poor land speculations left the financier of America bankrupt. He was thrown into the debtor's prison and was released after 3 years thanks to the Bankruptcy Act, sparing him a lifetime behind bars, though he still owed a whopping $2,948,000. He lived out his day in obscurity with his wife on the outskirts of Philadelphia and died in 1806 with no public commemorations. These two people saved America from ceasing to exist as a nation in their times. While many still see them as war-profiteering businessmen, others see them and remember them as a beacon of light during the darkest days of the US economy. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe for more amazing content.